My name is David Burns, and I'm a associate professor at Salisbury University. I started my career right out of college at a organization called the Cable News Network, CNN, which may sound impressive now, but it wasn't when it first started. It was only 4 years old at the time. So I think I was employee number 400 or something like that. But it was terrific because it was the Wild West. During my time there, I got asked to, there were a lot of civil wars going on, a lot of strife going on around the world. I started traveling. So I got out of the studio, and most of my career has been in the field, which has been very nice, and as an editor. So from CNN, which paid very little money, I went to NBC News, and NBC News is a large network in the US, and I was able to make more money and so on. But in 1988, they started corporatizing. And so news had to start making money instead of, back then, news didn't have to make money. It was called a public service. It became a commercial enterprise, and they started closing down bureaus all over the world. They started laying off people. So I saw the writing on the wall because I didn't have a lot of seniority with that company at the time. So I went to graduate school. I got my master's degree. And from there, I was still working full-time for NBC, but also going to school. So I got my master's and then started teaching. So teaching in the mid-1990s became sort of part of my larger salary, but I would always be working in news. I'd go overseas, I would work local stories, I'd work national stories, and so I always kept my hands in it, mostly with NBC, some with CNN. In the late 90s, I started going overseas. I lived in Poland for a couple of years, worked for that was right after the transition, and that was exciting because I worked for a newspaper. You know, communism had just been replaced by capitalism, and so I was teaching First Amendment journalism to old communists and to young people, and that was exciting. I mean, teaching investigative journalism and all kinds of different kinds of journalism to working professionals and to students. I was there for almost 3 years, and then went to Jordan, to the Middle East. Lived in Jordan for 3 years, and there I was freelancing for CNN. And that was an interesting time because that was when the U.S. had no-fly zones in Iraq, and we weren't a very liked group of people. And Jordan is right on the border with Iraq, so there was a lot of great news that was coming out of there. From Jordan, I came back to the United States and got my PhD at the University of Maryland. Once I was there, I started a student-produced television network where we were producing live news every day. That became we got awarded several years in a row for the best newscast in the nation for student-produced newscast. From Maryland, I went to Dubai. I lived in the United Arab Emirates for almost 4 years, teaching journalism, First Amendment journalism to women, Emirati women. So that was really interesting, teaching them how to tell their own stories. From Dubai, it was very easy to fly into Afghanistan, and I was doing a lot of training of Afghan journalists so that they could tell their own stories instead of having Western media tell the Afghan story, have Afghanis tell their stories. After Dubai, after 4 years of Dubai, I came back for 1 year at the University of Maryland, where I built that bureau back up again. But then due to budget cuts, they kind of ran out of money. This was 2008, 2009. The economy had crashed, and I got a job at Salisbury University. So at Salisbury University, I've been the SUTV faculty advisor, and we went from producing hardly any programs at all, one show a semester, to producing 6 television programs a semester, multiple shows. So, and that's very little to do with me, has everything to do with the students. And so the students have really sort of taken up that standard and carried it a long way, and they've really built a nice culture there. And I was very happy to hear that, this is sort of the spirit of what you all are doing here, so that's fantastic. The best thing that I enjoy whole cloth about teaching is this idea of taking things that I love to do, storytelling. Doesn't matter if you're doing nonfiction storytelling in news or you're doing fiction storytelling in movies and so on. And sort of breaking it down and deconstructing what people see every day, what they consume every day. They go to movies, they watch television every day, and showing them how it's done, and you know, pulling the curtain back and deconstructing it, and then saying, hey, why don't you go and give that a try? You know, try and do this thing, and then see that light go on when they do it, and they're proud of it, and they do something that they know is good. I mean, that's the best reward in the world, right? So, yeah, that's what I love about it. That's what I love about teaching. You know, I used to be a camera person and an editor and a producer, and and that's a great creative outlet. But I also found that teaching is a wonderful creative outlet too. You know, teaching people how to do things in an interesting way and have them remember it and carry that knowledge away with them for the rest of their lives. It's kind of neat. Learning how to do anything, any artistic thing, anything in which you're expressing yourself is a very daunting task, and you're not going to be very good at it the first time you do it. You know, I tell people that the lights and the cameras and everything else are just like when you were a very small child in grammar school and they taught you how to hold a pencil. You know, they taught you how to hold a pencil not because the idea was, here's how to hold a pencil. It is, here's how to hold a pencil, and now you're going to be able to express yourself. You're going to be able to transcend time and space and, you know, and everything else, right? You can leave a note that says, I love you, Mom, and walk away, and she'll get it when she comes back, and you're not even there. And she can hold on to that forever and ever and ever, and, you know, give it back to you when you're 50 years old. And that is a mode of expression. But when you first started writing with a pencil, it looked terrible, right? I mean, it was all chicken scratch. And it took a while for you to master that instrument. And it's the same thing with lights, it's the same thing with cameras, it's the same thing with microphones. It takes a while to do that. And so it's true that, you know, when you first start out, you are not using this equipment necessarily in the most efficient way or even in the most proper way. However, repetition is the key. Just like anything else, if you are someone who works out a lot, it's all about repetition. The more you do it, the better you get. And I find that students who only use the equipment during the course of the course, when I ask them to use it, then they still have that, they're still writing like, you know, like a grammar school person with those instruments at the end of the semester. If they are constantly using these tools, constantly getting past the technical part of it, like, oh, am I pressing the right buttons? Am I positioning the light in the right place? Once they get past that and it becomes sort of second nature to them, that's when the mode of expression starts. Now, the problem is that when we're producing programs, viewers are far less willing to accept poor quality than anyone, because they're sitting there with a remote control and they have 500 other channels to watch. And so, you know, the industry won't allow for out of focus shots. They won't allow for poor audio. They won't allow for, you know, this is a craft, and there's a level of expectation there that both the viewer has and the industry has. And the quicker you can get to sort of minimal standards with the equipment and minimal standards with your storytelling, the more people are going to watch your programs. And that's really what we want, isn't it? We want people to watch these messages. So my advice to people who are just starting out is take that camera and own that camera. Walk around with that camera. Play with that camera, see what it can do, see what it can't do. In the same way that you probably did that as a grammar school student. You picked up that pencil and you looked at it and you saw, you know, what end worked the best, and, you know, and everything else. It's the same kind of concept. It is not, you know, this industry is not an industry for hobbyists. It's an industry for craftsmen. And a craftsman spends hours upon hours on his craft before he feels comfortable or she feels comfortable with it. You know, I kind of look at a craft, as an industry, anything like that, and things that have ways of conduct and modes of conduct. And I think about driving, you know. I mean, can you be an unprofessional driver when you first get your license? You know, oh, I don't need to go by those rules. I don't need to go by those rules. Those rules don't apply to me yet. You know, well, if that's the case, when do they start applying to you, okay? If you are interested in this industry and you're interested in participating in it, best thing to do is right off the bat, right from the get-go, start acting professionally, start acting and using the tools of this industry, both the ethical tools, the production tools, the technical tools, the rules of engagement for storytelling. All of those things are very, very important. And they're not necessarily going to wait for you to decide when you give yourself the moniker of professional. It's going to be assumed that you're going to follow the rules of the road as soon as you decide, I want to get into this industry. You've got to have the right attitude coming in. Look, you all are going to be producing things that are going to be seen by many, 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 many people. And it's not going to be seen by just your friends or just your family and so on. That's the difference between me shooting my 8-year-old's birthday party and being seen by us, or not at all until they're 16 and I want to embarrass him. But by the masses. And so you've got to act professionally from the very beginning. You are now a mass communicator, whether you like it or not, and whether you think you fit into that role or not. There's an assumption of behavior that you're going to take into that position. One of the best, and like you said, as an Emmy judge, those Emmy Awards are the best of the best, all right? They're lots of good pieces, but we're looking at the very, very best of the best pieces and awarding them and recognizing them. Well, what that means is every single piece has to come together in a very nice and artistic way. If you approach any story, it doesn't matter if you're talking about film or news, it doesn't matter. You're looking for the human face. You're looking for the face of this story. It's man versus what? Man versus man versus nature, man versus machine. What is it? But there's a human element to that story. The writer looks at that human element and they decide, I'm going to write a script, and they choose very specific words that help to establish that story in the best possible way. And then they give it to an actor, and the actor looks at those words and they decide how best to verbally deliver those already well-written words in the best possible way. And then they look at a videographer, a director of photography, and that person is sitting there going, what's the most interesting way I can shoot this to convey the message that we all are trying to convey? And they do it visually in that way. And I really do think that videographers are very much like writers. They decide on shots in the same way that writers decide on words. I'm going to use this specific word because this specific word it drives the point home better. Videographers do the exact same thing with the camera angle they choose, with the camera shot they choose. Everything is an expression that tries to convey meaning in that shot. And then the sound person says, well, how am I going to surround this sound? What kind of sound effects am I going to use? What kind of soundtrack am I going to use? What's the best way? And when all these people come together and they all have this unified theory, unified vision of what this program is going to be, that's when you have excellence. So we kind of go back to this idea of being sort of an amateur in a professional realm. I always say we always strive for perfection, not because we're ever going to achieve it, but by doing so, we achieve excellence. And that's really what all those people are trying to do, is produce the most excellent piece of what they do. And when it comes together into a piece of art, it has an impact that is far greater than the sum of its parts. I just watched Son of Saul at the movie theater, and that is an amazing story, shot from the perspective of one concentration camp prisoner, and very powerful, very, very powerful movie. I mean, sobering and intense and everything else, but from one person's perspective, right? We know that millions of people died in the Holocaust, but this is one person's perspective, and it was amazingly powerful for an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. And that's the power of what the human face can do, right? What personalizing a story can do. The best stories, books, movies, television programs have the best characters, right? Have the best human people. And telling that story through those human eyes, that's the key to an Emmy, that's the key to an Oscar, that's the key to anything. For people who don't, I give advice to people who don't really know where they want to go or what they want to do in the business. They know they want to work in the business, but they don't know what. I give them the same advice I give to people who do know what they want to do in the business. And that is, you don't know what, you know what you want to do, but you don't know what you're going to do, right? If you told me my dream was not going to be a war photographer when I first started. I had no idea I was going to work for CNN. I wanted to be a sports person. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a play-by-play or a color person. That was my dream. And then I realized after I did some games that sports is kind of boring because there's always like, you know, a score at the end and there's nothing, the games all sort of seem the same. And although I was a sportsman my whole life, once I started covering the thing as a professional, I realized this is kind of tedious, you know. And then I got hired at CNN. And they said, well, you're doing news, man. That's what you're doing. And I said, I guess I'm doing news now, right? and literally, you know, in journalism school, they told me, carry a passport with you wherever you go. Just when you go to work, carry a passport with you. And so that seemed to be easy. And so I did. And then one day at CNN, they said, who's got a passport in their pocket? And I went, I do. And they said, all right, you're going to Lebanon. And I got trained on the camera on the plane ride there, and I became a photographer for CNN. So you never know what you're going to do in this business. You know what you might want to do. But my advice to people is, you know, while you're in college, man, experiment with everything. You know, yeah, you can be a jack of all trades and a master of none, but you know, you need to know a little about a lot, because once you get hired, at least you can converse in any way. You have no idea what they're going to ask you to do. You might want to be, I have a lot of students who want to be filmmakers, they do, and they don't want to do news at all. And then within 6 months, 8 months, they get offered jobs in news, and guess what? They're news people, you know, and they're doing films on the side, but they're paying their bills with news. And so, you know, don't turn down anything, and don't turn off anything. Don't say, oh, this doesn't pertain to me, I'm never going to do this. Because I would have had no idea what I was going to do, or I had no idea what I was going to do when I was that age, what was in my future. And you know, I thought I had my life relatively planned out. I thought I was going to be a radio person, you know, initially, and then I became a television person, and I thought I was going to be a sports person, and I became a news person, and now I'm a professor. I never, ever in a million years thought I'd be teaching people who wanted to learn from me. So, you know, you never know where this crazy life is going to take you. So be prepared for anything, and you know what you love and consume it. You know, if you want to get into this business, deconstruct, watch, steal liberally from people. Look at how Spike Lee tells his stories and say, wow, how is that different from how Quentin Tarantino tells stories? And how is that different from, you know, and then steal liberally. I'm going to try that next time. I'm going to try that technique. And very, very soon, you're not mimicking people, but you're developing your own style. You're developing your own sound. You're developing your own vision. And that's when, you know, you become the storyteller that you are, the content creator that you are. So yeah, my advice to people who do and don't know what they're doing is, you know, learn everything while you're here. There's nothing stopping you from learning every possible thing, because once you get out there, you're going to fit into whatever role, you know, you seek to get in the door. You may be a social media maven, you know. You may never have a Facebook, Instagram, or any kind of account like that. And next thing you know, you're going to be in charge of it. So, the whole concept of, you know, social media is, and those techniques, those storytelling techniques, are, you know, as storytellers, you can still take the foundations of good shooting, good editing, good sound creation, and apply them to social media, and they're going to be even more powerful. I know that Vine is gone now, you know, those little 6-second videos, but those little 6-second videos were pretty powerful, right? I mean, you had to tell a whole story in 6 seconds. That means you can't show a wide shot, you know, you've got to go right to the close-up, right? And that's kind of exciting. But the thing that's really changed, and the thing that I think that's super interesting, is that we're in this transitional time now where people are watching movies on a, you know, a 16 by 9, 57 inch, I don't know what centimeters that is, big screen television, where you have huge vistas and so on. And then you have people that are watching things on something this big, right? And the way you tell a story, if this is the final destination, is going to be far different than the way you tell a story with a large screen destination. Because on this, a medium shot is a wide shot. You know, you can't find any detail in a huge panoramic shot. And so, you know, the sound is improving, but the nice thing about this is I can put headphones in and I can surround myself with the sound that I can't necessarily do unless I have a huge investment in sound systems in my home. So there are things that, you know, every medium has its advantages and disadvantages. You know, I always said, you know, newspapers are great, but they can't, you know, demonstrate Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, right? Radio is a very simple thing that can do that very well, but it doesn't really portray the color blue very well, right? So, you know, everything has its limitations and its advantages. But we're at this time where you have to think about what the final destination is. If the final destination is going to be the internet, or it's going to be small form, small media, then you need to change your storytelling techniques to reflect that. If you're shooting something for the big screen, then you know, you have those vistas that you can help create setting for and this kind of stuff. Good storytelling is good storytelling, and it doesn't matter if you're tweeting something. You know, a tweet is a headline basically. And using those good storytelling tools, you're going to succeed no matter what you do. Just don't be afraid of the technologies. But I'm excited about being able to shoot, edit, post here. You know, I mean, when I first broke into this business, I was carrying 75 pounds worth of cameras around, you know, camera, a deck, microphones, bat belts, you know, all this stuff. And I couldn't broadcast from it. I could then hump myself back to the studio and take that videotape and then try to feed it somewhere. I can take this thing, aim it in a general direction, hit Facebook Live, and I'm broadcasting to the world. That's pretty neat. That's pretty special, right? So that's what makes the world so interesting right now.